Okay, welcome everyone. My name's Eloisa Ramos, and we are here to study the text of A Course in Miracles. And I am joined by my daughter, Sonia. Hi, Sonia.
Hi.
My friend, Teresa.
Hello.
Hello. And my friend, Connie. Hi, Connie. So we are going to read chapter 4. We left off on chapter 4, The Illusions of the Ego. And we are on section 5. Let's see. Oops, that's the introduction. Oh no, sorry. Let me find the right place here. Oh, okay, here we go. Section 4, Illusions of the ego body illusion. Okay. Okay, paragraph 1. All things work together for good. There are no exceptions except in the ego's judgment. The ego exerts maximal vigilance about what it permits into awareness. And this is not the way a balanced mind holds together. The ego is thrown further off balance because it keeps its primary motivation from your awareness and raises control rather than sanity to predominance. The ego has every reason to do this, according to the thought system which gave rise to it and which it serves. Sane judgment would inevitably judge against the ego and must be obliterated by the ego in the interest of its self-preservation. Okay. Okay. All right. So all things work together for good. And most of the time that can be, a little hard to see. And that's because the ego likes to make exceptions to that. So there are no exceptions to God, so to Holy Spirit, to vision. So Holy Spirit vision sees that all things work together for good. And the ego, however, will judge things as somehow not for our own good. And so it keeps us limited, and you could almost say tunnel with a very small focus, tunnel vision, to not be able to see the big picture that all things work for good. And so the ego, when you think about the thought system of the ego, you can think about our beliefs that justify separation, that, let's see, that are considered attack thoughts, that that makes it appear as if we are a separate self from other separate selves that have an ego with self-interest. And what it's saying here is that a balanced mind cannot hold together very well when we limit, when the ego exerts vigilance about what it permits into awareness. So it's like a filter. And so the mind can become unbalanced because the filter that the ego uses has to distort through interpretation what is coming up in our life, to not see it as working for our own good. And this is how the ego preserves itself as a thought system. And number five says the ego has every reason to do this according to the thought system which gave rise to it, which is a fear-based thought system, and which it serves. So naturally, if we could see that everything works for our own good, well, we're not going to be in fear. But if we think that there's a threat to us, that something is happening that is not in our best interest, that is going to, have some kind of a negative effect on us, or can hurt us, or can attack us, or can, be a loss for us, then it's all going to be fear. And one of the things about being in fear is it's really not a good time to make judgments, to make decisions, because our judgment is really off balance when we're in fear. It's always it's always better to release the fear first and then make the decisions, because otherwise the Holy Spirit is not going to be able to guide that decision. And of course, sane judgment, if we were in our right mind, number 6, it would inevitably judge against the ego, and therefore must be obliterated by the ego in the interest of self-preservation. So that's pretty much saying that that the more we protect the ego, the more that we are mentally unstable. And that's true. Our judgments become very out of touch with reality. Okay, so any questions there? No? Okay. All right, go ahead, Sonia, number 2.
A major source of the ego's off-balance state is the lack of discrimination between the body and the thoughts of God. Thoughts of God are unacceptable to the ego because they clearly point to the non-existence of the ego itself. The ego therefore either distorts them or refuses to accept them. It cannot, however, make them cease to be. It therefore tries to conceal not only unacceptable body impulses, but also the thoughts of God, because both are threatening to it. Being concerned primarily with its own preservation in the face of threat, the ego perceives them as the same. By perceiving them as the same, the ego attempts to save itself from being swept away, as it would surely be in the presence of knowledge.
Okay. You want to say anything there, Sonia?
I just had a question. Let's see. I was trying to figure out. And number 5, it therefore tries to conceal not only unacceptable body impulses, but also the thoughts of God. That line in this paragraph is reminding me of what the ego does is it misinterprets the miracle impulse, right? I don't remember what section that was exactly.
The distorted miracle impulse?
Yeah, that's what it was. That's
Yeah.
what this paragraph is reminding me of. So I was just wondering if that is the same thing it's talking about here.
Yeah, I found that really interesting too, because the ego is basically trying to preserve itself, and it's interesting that it's not just the thoughts of God, okay, because the thoughts of God know the truth. They know that there is no separation. So they know that the ego is an illusion. It's not real. We're just one self. We're not all these individual little private minds, okay? So I could really understand that that would be a threat to the ego, but it says that it also tries to conceal the quote unquote unacceptable body impulses, okay, because both are threatening to it. And let's see, and in number 6, it also says that the ego perceives them as the same, which kind of makes sense because you were talking about the distorted miracle impulse. So this is where, for example, the the body needs, body impulses to procreate, to consume food, to consume. So those kind of basic, quote unquote, human needs can be by the ego, because it's threatened by both of them, kind of fuses them together, so that the more instinctive impulses become almost intuition to people who are very identified with their ego. Do you see what I'm saying? So sometimes people will say, oh, they'll say something about the future, like they know what's going to happen, and they'll say, oh, that's just my gut instinct. And they'll say it's intuition. So we'll confuse the gut instinct with the intuition, which is more spirit guided. And so what will happen is that they will confuse the animal nature with a divine nature. So they'll literally think of, for example, having sex as making love. So it's a it's a meshing almost of the two, because the ego perceives them both as the same. Does that help, Sonia? And the distorted miracle impulse, the miracle is really a recognition of our true identity as one self. So the distorted miracle impulse will try to bring about joining as oneself, but it will try to do it at the physical level, or at the ego mind level. It will try to bring, and call it joining, but it's not really joining. It's not the recognition that the body is not real and that we're just one mind. They're trying to hold on to the self as the body ego, which is an illusion, and then want to reconcile, want to bring balance and bring oneness by joining physically through sex, or through doing things together, like having a partner, that that kind of thing, companionship, physical companionship. And so the miracle is distorted because it's not recognizing our true nature. It's trying to hold on to the self as a body ego and spirit. So what we do is we try to say, well, we're all three. I'm a body and I'm spirit, and I'm I'm an ego too. I have a private mind, private thoughts, that kind of thing. Okay. So anything more there?
No, that's good.
Okay. All right. Number 3.
Okay. Any thought system that confuses God and the body must be insane. Yet this confusion is essential to the ego, which judges only in terms of threat or non-threat to itself. In one sense, the ego's fear of God is at least logical, since the idea of him does dispel the ego. But fear of the body, with which the ego identifies so closely, makes no sense at all.
Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that, Connie?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. Yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you're in your ego state, I mean, that's totally what you identify with. Yeah.
Yes, and so so the confusion of God with the body is pretty let's see, it's ingrained in a lot of religions. So a lot of us grew up believing that God made the body. And so the eternal makes the non-eternal. So then we get into opposites. Opposites make themselves, but how can they make themselves if they don't have what the other one has to give? You see what I'm saying? So if God is eternal, how could he have given the body impermanence? God does not have impermanence to give. So to create is to create in our own likeness. So a lemon tree can only give you lemons. It's not going to be able to give you apples, you know? So it can only extend, its nature. And so for God to make a body would mean that the eternal makes its opposite, the non-eternal, which of course makes no sense at all. And also, line 4, but fear of the body with which the ego identifies so closely makes no sense at all, because what happens is that the ego dissociates from the body. It doesn't just identify with the body, it also dissociates from the body because it rejects the body for many, many reasons. I mean, you can look at your body and decide that, hey, I'm an ugly duckling or something like that, and reject your body for that reason. Or you can literally dissociate because you don't want to, you want to dissociate from the pain that you think the body is feeling. Okay, so you give the body a kind of the ego can give the body a sense of being separate on its own. To be able to make a separation there, a gap, and deny that it made it. Anyway, yeah. And so it says that that confusion is essential to the ego, which judges only in terms of threat or not threat to itself. So it's interesting because the ego made the body, but it perceives the body as a threat to itself. So it's a little bit like the story of Frankenstein, the Frankenstein monster, that you become afraid of what you've made because it turns into a monster, basically. So what it means is that what the ego makes, the ego does not make out of love. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so number 4. Teresa, is it Connie?
It's me.
Okay.
The body is the ego's home by its own election. It is the only identification with which the ego feels safe, since the body's vulnerability is its own best argument that you cannot be a god. This is the belief that the ego sponsors eagerly. Yet the ego hates the body because it cannot accept it as good enough to be its home. Here is where the mind becomes actually dazed. Being told by the ego that it is really part of the body and that the body is its protector, the mind is also told that the body cannot protect it. Therefore, the mind asks, where can I go for protection? To which the ego replies, turn to me. The mind, and not without cause, reminds the ego that it has itself insisted that it is identified with the body. So there is no point in turning to it for protection. The ego has no real answer to this because there is none, but it does have a typical solution. It obliterates the question from the mind's awareness. out of awareness, once out of awareness, the question can and does produce uneasiness, but it cannot be answered because it cannot be asked.
Yeah. What do you think of all that, Teresa? Anything
I think
coming?
it's crazy making.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's just take a line by line. Okay, the
Sure.
body is the ego's home by its own election. Okay, so so the ego identifies with the body. Okay, and that makes it its home. The ego, let's see, the ego are basically thoughts, and those thoughts reside, you could say maybe they can reside maybe as cellular memories, as DNA instruction or something like that in the body. People can use the word energy or something like that, information. So, but there's not really any difference between the ego and the body, although to the ego, there definitely is a difference. Okay, both of them are illusions. They're not real. But the ego is the perceiver, the interpreter. And so it looks at the body as its own home. And so it identifies with it to feel safe. And it says that it's because the body's vulnerability is its own best argument that you cannot be of God. Because the ego tells us that we're a body. And it says, yeah, you're a body. Well, look at you. You're impermanent. You die. You're not eternal like God. So you're not God. You separated from God. You're no longer God. You've lost perfection, basically. You've lost eternity. The best you got is me now. So so this is a belief that the ego sponsors eagerly. Okay. However, the ego hates the body. Okay. Because the body is imperfect. Okay. It cannot accept it as good enough to be its home. So it's its home and it needs safety, but yeah, the ego hates it. So so this is where the mind actually becomes dazed, because the mind, which is what we are, is being told by the ego that we are really, part of the body, that the body, and here's the thing, this is why this gets really, really crazy, like Teresa was saying. It says being told by the ego that it is really part of the body. Okay, so the ego seems to be talking, who is the it there? Being told by the ego that it is really part of the body. Okay, it's talking about the mind. Yeah, here's where the mind. Okay, but it's a little mind. It's a mind with a small m. So it's really, this is really weird, but it's really kind of just talking to itself. Because remember that the ego believes it can split itself. So the ego is really talking to it as it thinks we are itself, really part of the body, and that the body is its protector. The mind is also told that the body cannot protect it. So the ego thought system is a thought system of contradiction, of duality. And because of that, it's meaningless. So, and this line right here shows that, because it's basically saying, yes, and the body is its protector, but also the body cannot protect it. It's in the same sentence. So therefore the mind asks, where can I go for protection? To which the ego replies, well, yeah, turn to me. Okay. And so the mind seems to be this separate self from the ego, okay, which is a thought system in the mind, which made it. And so it's like, it's almost like a hallucination talking back to me, telling me, giving me advice, telling me, oh, well, if you don't, you can go here for protection, or, don't do that. That's not going to be safe, do this. So it's almost like I make a hallucination that I call the ego, and then it talks back to me, giving me advice. um, so let's see. So number 8, the mind, and not without cause, reminds the ego that it has itself insisted that it's identified with a body. And so there's no point in turning to it for protection. Okay, so the minute that the mind starts using logic and remind the ego, well, wait a minute, you're not making any sense. And the ego has no real answer. What it does is it obliterates the question from the mind's awareness, so that you can't remember the question to ask. So it's almost like there's some questions that we wouldn't even think of asking, of questioning our own thinking, because we've given the ego the power to forget those. So that's why memory is so selective. We don't remember everything. We only remember certain things. And then we remember them inaccurately because they're an interpretation of what we want to think actually happened. So yeah, so anyway, yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah. Okay, number 5. My turn. Okay. This is the question that must be asked. Where can I go for protection? Seek and ye shall find does not mean that you should seek blindly and desperately for something you would not recognize. Meaningful seeking is consciously undertaken, consciously organized, and consciously directed. The goal must be formulated clearly and kept in mind. Learning and wanting to learn are inseparable. You learn best when you believe what you are trying to learn is of value to you. However, not everything you may want to learn has lasting value. Indeed, many of the things you want to learn may be chosen because their value will not last. Okay. Okay, so where can I go for protection? Okay, so ultimately, fear is about not feeling safe. So the whole ego thought system is based on fear. And because it's based on fear, how can it offer us any protection? It can't. Okay, now that doesn't mean we don't fall for it, because we do. A lot of us hold on to fear, thinking that it protects us. And you can see it, for example, with a lot of the people that have, little phobias, like maybe you're afraid of spiders, or maybe you're afraid of water, or something. And the fear itself, they have a hard time wanting to let go of the fear, because they really believe that the fear is what keeps them safe from getting too close to the spiders. Okay, so they have made fear protection. and but logically, fear cannot offer us protection, because protection would be no fear. So so that's the question that we must ask, because the ego cannot offer us any protection if we really, really look at what it does offer. And if that's the case, it has nothing of value to really offer. And so for us to seek, it says, seek and you shall find, does not mean that you should seek blindly and desperately for something you would not recognize. Okay. Okay, so when we confuse fear with protection, we are going to be seeking blindly and desperately, because we would not recognize protection as it really is, which would be love. That's what protection is. It's love. It's a choice for love. Okay. And we wouldn't recognize it because we're choosing fear as protection. And so unforgiveness is fear, because unforgiveness is attack, and it is, of course, fearful, because then you're going to be afraid of retaliation. So you're going to feel vulnerable. You're going to feel unprotected, because you're going to imagine there's a threat, because once we attack, we're going to feel guilty. And once we feel guilty, we're going to be on alert mode for the payback. I used to fight a lot when I was little with my little brother. So, and it was, let's see, it was almost like a given that, if he did something to me, I had to get him back. So it was almost like I didn't question it. I mean, that's the main that's the main thing. It seemed like protection was defense. And if you're attacked, then you better defend. And better yet, if you attack first, then you try to intimidate to make sure they don't attack you. So it's just, yeah, it becomes a tit for tat, kind of dog eat dog world, and so okay, so where can I go for protection? So to seek protection, we need to be very conscious of what we are seeking here. And let's see, and learning and wanting to learn are inseparable. So we have to be willing to be wrong, because in order to learn, we have to be willing to correct our errors in our own thinking. We have to be willing to let go that maybe tit for tat is not going to bring me protection. Maybe defense is not going to bring me protection. Let's see, number 6, you learn best when you believe what you are trying to learn is of value to you. Yeah, so we have to give value to having inner peace, or we're not going to, take the steps to seek it, to find it. And if we don't see a problem with conflict, if we don't see a problem with, you bet I'm going to, you bet if someone does something to me, I am going to stand up and, not let myself get pushed around, kind of a thing, definitely not going to turn the other cheek, kind of thing. I'm definitely not going to forgive. So we're not giving value to inner peace. And then if we don't value inner peace, is because we don't see the let's see, we haven't seen the connection between what the grievance and not forgiving does to us, because it never hurts anybody else. It only hurts us. And I think that if we really recognized that we can only attack ourselves, and as an ego body illusion, we would be more motivated to let go of the ego thought system. Yeah, and it talks about lasting value and wanting to learn things that don't have lasting value. So the ego thought system is not something that has value. It's a temporary value, just like everything in the world is temporary, because they're not thoughts that are of God. They're not eternal thoughts. Okay. Any questions on that one?
No.
Actually, number 8, indeed, many of the things you want to learn may be chosen because their value will not last. That's referring to just specialness, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because think about it, if we recognize that our true value is eternal and that we're all created the same, there would be no way to differentiate ourselves and make oneself more special than another. So we do need, and also think about, things that we value. For example, maybe there are things that are changed. So my preferences or my tastes or my likes, so maybe when I was little, oh, I really like the color blue and I wanted all my clothes to be blue, and so you better not take my blue plate because that's mine. Okay. And now I don't like blue, now I like, now I like red. Okay. And so the things that we like, the things that we value don't last. And so then we're disappointed, or I really liked this actor in this movie and I am definitely going to go see his next movie, and then I go see his next movie and it's like, oh my gosh, he sucked in that movie. So much for the value. He's not my favorite actor anymore. So we give value to the things of the world that don't last. Whatever it is, it's it can even be, let's see, it can even be, the place where I live. Well, prices are too high now, I'm going to go find another place, that's cheaper. Or, hey, I don't like the people, moving in to my neighborhood. I'm, you know what I'm saying? So I can fall in love with my country and then fall out of love with my country. Or I can, fall in love with my partner and then fall out of love with my partner, that kind of a thing. They were valuable for a while and now they're not valuable anymore. I don't need them. Something like that. Okay, number 6. Sonia?
The ego thinks it is an advantage not to commit itself to anything that is eternal, because the eternal must come from God. Eternalness is the one function the ego has tried to develop, but has systematically failed to achieve. The ego compromises with the issue of the eternal, just as it does with all issues touching on the real question in any way. By becoming involved with tangential issues, it hopes to hide the real question and keep it out of mind. The ego's characteristic busyness with non-essentials is for precisely that purpose. Preoccupations with problems set up to be incapable of solution are favorite ego devices for impeding learning progress. In all these diversionary tactics, however, the one question that is never asked by those who pursue them is, what for? This is the question that you must learn to ask in connection with everything. What is the purpose? Whatever it is, it will direct your efforts automatically. When you make a decision of purpose, then you have made a decision about your future effort, a decision that will remain in effect unless you change your mind.
Mhm. Okay. Do you want to say something there, Sonia? Anybody?
Well, it sounds like the ego is trying to keep us all embroiled in the illusion so that we don't seek God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, and so it's important to always ask this question here, because we do get very distracted with number 5, characteristic busyness with non-essentials. And it's precisely for that purpose, which is to keep us from, yes, from learning or unlearning the ego thought system. And so with all the number 7, all the diversionary tactics, the one question that is never asked is what for? So what is it for? So that's always the overriding it's the underlying intention. So the doing in itself, the ego wants to say that different types of activities have inherent worth and value in and of themselves. Okay, but that's not true. Okay, it's the purpose behind them that gives them eternal value or non-eternal value. So it's always for the purpose of healing the mind, for the purpose of extending love, or it's for the purpose of making myself special, a special ego, or for supporting the ego thought system by believing that I am a body, and holding on to fear, of being vulnerable to attack, to disease, to war, to death. So, what is the purpose of being, of the experience of time, and believing that we are a body or an ego? What's the purpose? So the Holy Spirit will always use everything that the ego has made that's impermanent to help us learn the lessons that we are here to learn, so we can remember the truth about what we are, that we are eternal spirit, and that we are love, because we are not separate and not different from our Creator. And knowing that would awaken the mind to the recognition that the ego and the body are illusions. They're illusory. And so they can be used for the purpose of helping to bless and awaken other minds, quote, other minds. That there are no other minds, but as long as we believe, you know, that we're an ego, we think we have another mind, or that we are a separate mind. So yeah, that's probably the most important question about anything that we do. Okay, anything else? No. Okay, so I think this is good. Let me see the next section, the rewards of God. Okay, all right, well, we'll go on to the next section. Until next time.